Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Tuesday, November 19th, 2019, and today we're going to be taking a look at the 2020 Senate elections. Now, I know this is a long way away. This is just as far as the presidential election, but it definitely deserves some attention. We have the impeachment hearings going on right now, and the House of Representatives with a Democratic majority and the United States Senate with a Republican majority. There's going to be a lot of turnover when it comes down to the 2020 election. We have a couple of states up that are very, very close, and some other states that are still toss-ups, but definitely leaning in one favor of either political party. And it should be pretty interesting looking at the final composition, considering that Republicans are ahead 53-47. Now, if you remember back in 2018, the Senate majority was only 51-49 in favor of the GOP. After the 2018 midterms, the Republicans gained 2 seats as a net and ended up with a 53-47 majority. By no means is that a supermajority, but it definitely means that they have some leeway in between voters, because if you remember back in 2017 and 2018, there was Lisa Murkowski from the state of Alaska and Susan Collins. Both of them actually pretty much opposed the Republican Party on some key issues, and that really ended up bringing some of the votes to a failure. But now they had that little cushion, 53-47, which means that even 3 senators can vote against it, and they'll hit that 50-50 tie, and then it'll be a tiebreaker by VP Pence. So we don't know who the vice president is going to be after Donald Trump. Obviously, that is what is going to be decided by the presidential election, but we have a pretty general idea of how the Senate composition will be by the end of 2020. Now, if we're taking a look at this map, there are a number of states on here that definitely scream Republican Party. We see states like Montana, Idaho, Wyoming, a lot of these states over in the red wall area down in the south. But also, some of them may actually be toss-ups. Now, I'm not saying throw in states like Louisiana and throw them up for toss-up and Nebraska as toss-up, but we definitely see a little bit closer races than we might previously expect in solid Republican states. For example, Montana or Kansas, possibly Texas. It really all depends. So let's go ahead and characterize some of these quote-unquote safe states. Obviously, things do change. I could be wrong in a couple months from now. There could be new types of candidates, but I generally believe that these states that I'm filling in now will be considered safe for the political party that I'm putting them in the column. So example, Idaho, Wyoming, South Dakota, Nebraska, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Louisiana, Tennessee, West Virginia, and South Carolina. But South Carolina I do actually want to talk about, so I'm actually going to remove that from the safe column. As for the Democrats, I would characterize Illinois, Oregon, New Jersey, Delaware, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and that's pretty much it. And for another state, actually, I would consider the state of New Mexico as a solid Democratic state. That may come as a surprise to some of you guys. However, I am confident that that one will be a pretty hefty margin for the Democratic candidate there. So that puts the Democrats at 42 seats, the Republicans at 39. But there are still a number of Republican and Democratic seats that we have yet to fill in. Now, this Senate election will definitely be based off of the performance of the Democrats, will definitely be based off of who the Democratic nominee is, because nobody's turning out to the 2020 ballots to vote only for the Senate, vote only for the House. The presidential election is the most important thing, and when you can get down ballot voters, for example, if let's say Sanders or Biden or Warren or any of them are the nominee, if they're able to excite voters to come out and vote for them, chances are they're voting for the Democratic candidates in other races as well, unless they have their own personal, vote for them. But typically, we see down ballot voting, and that makes sense. It's part of the American electorate here. But I guess that's just how things go. So let's go ahead and take a look at some of these more likely states. These are states that are not considered safe at this point, but definitely are in favor of a political party beyond a little bit more of a lean, which means that they're a little out of reach for Democrats or Republicans, depending on which way it's characterized, but it doesn't mean that it's a complete stretch. And some of these may be surprising to you. You see the toss-ups, and some of these have to inevitably be likely states, but I would characterize states like Kansas as likely. I would characterize states like Montana as likely. Now, the reason why I leave Montana as a likely state, I think this one could actually narrow down a lot if Steve Bullock drops out and runs for Senate. Beto O'Rourke was being very hard-headed when he said he would not run for United States Senator. That definitely eliminate a possibility for him. Steve Bullock said the same exact thing. I don't believe Steve Bullock because he doesn't have a shot at the presidency at this point based off of the current numbers. And he definitely has a lot better shot of going into the Senate. If they want a realistic shot at getting a pretty good majority or even beating the Republican majority, they're going to need Democrats in every area they can win. And they can win Montana. But right now, I would leave it likely because there could be another statewide known Dem to run. But as of right now, I think Steve Bullock is their top guy. As for Kansas, we've seen it get a little bit closer in statewide elections, like back in 2018 when we saw Laura Kelly win the governorship there. Being a Democratic governor during a year like that. And it made sense it was a Democratic wave year, but at the same time, we saw some other states go red that we didn't really expect. Going over to the states like Texas. Again, Texas, as of right now, we are seeing a Senate election here. Beto O'Rourke is not running for president. He's not running for president. He's not running for Senate here either. So we really may not see too much energy behind the Democratic candidate this race, even though this, again, would be a pretty good time for Democrats to invest in this race. Now, even if it is an inevitable loss, which I don't actually think it is, so it's not inevitable, the Democrats could theoretically win in Texas if everything goes their way. It's extremely unlikely, but it's not like throwing a Democrat in Oklahoma and expecting them to win. But Texas is pretty much a likely Republican state, but more of a lean to likely for the presidential election, which I think is pretty interesting. Going over to South Carolina, that one I would consider likely as well. Mississippi, I would also consider likely. Cindy Hyde-Smith is actually up in Mississippi. She was elected back in 2018, but that was to finish the term up to 2020. Again, I think this one could be likely depending on the Democratic candidate. And as for South Carolina, same exact thing there. There's actually a pretty notable Democrat who's getting pretty good attention nationwide for running in the South Carolina Senate race there. So that puts the Republicans at 44. We see the Democrats at 42. That remains 14 toss-up seats. Now, where are we seeing likely Democratic seats? Actually, let's go ahead and take a look at some of those. Going over to states like Virginia, that one I would characterize definitely as a likely Democratic seat. Michigan and Minnesota, even though John James is doing a little bit better than 2018, behind by 6-7% statewide, it's probably not going to happen, considering that Michigan is definitely not going to be solid Trump country. He's going to have to work for that state. And at the same time, I don't think it's too likely that Gary Peters loses here, considering his he's not as popular as Debbie Stabenow, sure, but he definitely has I think he definitely has enough support to go ahead and win here. Going over to Minnesota, we see Tina Smith here with her first actual election. Again, just like, sorry about that, my screen recorder cut out, but essentially, I actually forgot where I was, but I think I was talking about Minnesota with Tina Smith. Yeah, probably. So she was elected back in 2018, just like Cindy Hyde-Smith, and they both are going to go ahead and run for this election to see if they get a full 6-year term this time around. So taking a look at the map, we have 45 Democrats, 44 Republicans. Well, let's take a look. I don't know why I never characterized Alaska. That one's actually a safe Republican state. My apologies. But we do have an interesting Senate election, or Senate elections, back down in Georgia. Now, both of these I will characterize as likely for right now. We see John Ossoff running in one election. And to be completely honest, he's a strong candidate, but I really don't see 2020 being the time that Georgia flips blue in the presidential election or the Senate election. This smaller circle is the special election, but they're both characterized the same, so this really shouldn't make that much of an impact. But it is going to be pretty interesting taking a look at this election. As for the special election, actually, I will discuss more about it because it definitely deserves a little bit more attention, considering that there's 2 Senate races on the ballot here in Georgia. But as of right now, both of these are actually likely. Now, I know many of you may disagree with that, but if you take a look at the voting history of Georgia and the candidates that they have up running right now, yes, they are strong, but are they strong enough to overcome number one, an incumbent, and then an open primary race where they may actually be eliminated in the jungle primary early on? But let's avoid talking about that again, because I want to make a video about that separately. As for Colorado, I think Cory Gardner is completely out. I really don't see a pathway for him winning there. It is possible, but I just don't see it happening at this point in time. Going over to New Hampshire, I would consider that one actually likely. I don't know why I didn't characterize that one before. Over in Maine, Susan Collins, she's in here right now. um, pretty much voted for Kavanaugh. That's the one thing the Democrats are really going to hit her on. Yes, she was bipartisan in the past, but I think that is going to be either, a death blow to her campaign if brought up enough. And I definitely think the Democrats are going to go ahead and capitalize on that. So that one I'm going to leave as a lean Republican state right now. Still a Republican state regardless, but again, I think it's a lean Republican state. Going over to Alabama, I think this one is going to flip to the GOP. I'm putting it in the lean column right now. I definitely see them having a narrow victory here over Doug Jones. Doug Jones could win if Roy Moore is the nominee again, but I don't think that's happening. And Jeff Sessions might actually clinch this nomination, which it should be pretty interesting taking a look further on. As for the state of Arizona, I would say that this one narrowly goes to the Democrats. Again, I see Martha McSally losing yet again. Number one, she was rejected by voters the first time. There's no real, smart idea behind putting her up again. But Arizona, I think, will go to the Democratic Party. As for Kentucky and North Carolina, I think these are all and Iowa, I think these are all lean Republican states. Now, they have a very general characterization. Now, some of you may not agree with Kentucky because of Mitch McConnell, but if you take a look at the 2008 Senate election there, we definitely could see a repeat if the Democrats are able to bring the energy that they brought back then, which may not be possible, but at this point in time, the Democrats definitely seem like they're on an up nationwide. As for North Carolina and Iowa, both of those states we're just going to come down to the wire regardless, but I still think that they'll end up in GOP hands. So that pretty much wraps up this video. 52 Republicans, 48 Democrats. Thank you guys for watching this video. Comment down suggestions below, and I will see you all tomorrow.